Mark Rutte is admired for his energy, his intellect, his determination, and his warmth. I'm so very pleased that he's here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming to the Chicago Council, Prime Minister Mark Rutte.
Ambassador Hartog Levin, Mrs. King, ladies and gentlemen, and Ambassador, thank you so much for the beautiful gift. I will treasure it. I will treasure it the rest of my life. Thank you so much. And first of all, it's good to be back in Chicago. I've been here once before, and that was for Unilever for an ice cream conference held in 2002. And since then, a lot has changed in Chicago, and a lot has changed in my career. But two things have remained the same. The curse of the billy goat and my love of ice cream. When I first came here, I could never have imagined that one day I would have the honor of addressing the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. So thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the discussion we'll have shortly. But first, a few words of introduction. When I was preparing for today, I recalled something Margaret Thatcher, one of my all-time favorite politicians, once said. Europe, she said, will never be like America. Europe is a product of history. America is a product of philosophy. It's a great quote, one of many that the Iron Lady has to her name. But speaking as a former student of history, I've never entirely agreed with her on this point. Of course, there are real contrasts between Europe and the United States. Economic, political, social, and cultural. But it is history, our historical ties, that make our differences minor compared with what we have in common. Take, for instance, your historical ties with my country, the Netherlands. Here are a few facts. The Pilgrim Fathers found refuge in the Dutch town of Leiden before setting sail for the New World in 1620. New York was originally founded as New Amsterdam, a Dutch trading post. The Netherlands was the first country 230 years ago to establish diplomatic relations with the United States. And you can even trace a direct line between the American Declaration of Independence and our own Act of Abjuration. That's the document that marked the birth of the Dutch Republic, in which the Dutch provinces rejected their Spanish overlord. It was the first time a people had deposed a monarch in such a way. In that sense, our King Philip II of Spain was your King George. And of course, there are many more historical connections like this, and they also involve other European countries. But it was only in the 20th century that those historical ties grew into a unique form of transatlantic solidarity. The First and Second World Wars and the Cold War that followed brought America and Europe even closer together. From a political, from a military, and from an economic point of view, right up to the present day. It was and remains an alliance based on a number of fundamental shared values: democracy, freedom, the rule of law, and a belief in free market principles. No wonder President Obama speaks of Europe as the cornerstone of our engagement with the world. I can assure you that for Europe, and certainly for the present Dutch government, the reverse is equally true. But even an alliance built on such strong foundations has to be maintained. We must never take the transatlantic relationship for granted. And that's the key message I bring with me to Chicago. That it is vital that the US and Europe continue working on their relationship to keep it up to date. Because we need you. And, can I say, you need us. Because in our dealings with other countries, we are better off working together than by ourselves. But also because the world around us is changing continuously. and changing circumstances demand action. The debt crisis in Europe, America's economic prospects, the rise of the BRICS, the Arab Spring, the alarming situation in countries like Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, and, of course, Syria. These developments all impact on each other and on the transatlantic relationship. This week's NATO summit in this beautiful city will explore some of these topics. But the transatlantic relationship goes beyond safety and security. There is at least one other dimension that deserves our constant attention, and I'm talking, of course, about the economy. These two dimensions reinforce each other. It's a two-way street. The more we can increase safety and security in the world, the better America and Europe can promote their shared international economic interests. And the more people in other countries will gain access to global markets. So, NATO's strategic military alliance and our transatlantic economic cooperation are directly connected. First, let me take a closer look at the economy. Because in spite of all the economic problems we need to solve in our own countries and our own region, we should never forget the importance of the economic relations that exist between America and Europe. Or how dynamic those relations are. Let's look at the facts. The US and Europe jointly account for about half of global GDP. That's enormous. The mutual flow of goods and services is worth $2.7 billion every day. And this equals 15 million jobs on both sides of the ocean. What's more, direct investment by America and Europe and direct investment by Europe and America greatly outweigh their investment in any other region in the world, including China, India, etc. The figures for my own country are no less impressive. The US is the biggest foreign investor in the Netherlands. But more surprisingly, perhaps, the Netherlands, a country whose economy ranks number 16 in the world, which covers an area only a tenth of California, and which has fewer inhabitants than Florida, is the third biggest investor in the US. Or to put it differently, about 625,000 American jobs are created by Dutch investment in the US and US exports to the Netherlands. There you are. $625,000. That's more or less the population of Washington, D.C. But here we are talking businessmen. I could go on. There are many more figures which will tell the same story. But I think the point is clear. The question now is, how can we broaden our relationship? How can we, by working even closer together, create more high-value jobs and make ourselves more competitive in international markets? These are the questions we should keep in mind as we make our way through the current crisis and beyond. And I'm pleased to say that the American government thinks the same way. When I visited President Obama last November, we quickly agreed only 3 topics really mattered: jobs, jobs, and jobs. Yes, that's why the Netherlands attaches such importance to the joint high-level working group on jobs and growth. The figures I just mentioned make it clear that even a small improvement in transatlantic economic cooperation can have a big positive impact. Greater economic integration, more free trade, and the removal of trade barriers can provide an enormous stimulus to our economies. A deep and comprehensive free trade agreement would boost the national incomes of the United States and Europe by many billions of dollars and euros each year. Of course, you can't set up a free trade zone overnight. But there are strong arguments for working step by step towards that goal. And the Netherlands is keen to take those steps. Improving economic cooperation is also important from another perspective. Both the US and Europe stand to gain by promoting the strong and stable development of the emerging economies in Asia and South America. And we know from experience that you need more than just good growth figures. A strong economy is built on a strong society. A society in which people have sufficient confidence in the future to invest in themselves by means of education, to buy houses and consumer goods, to save, to start a business, simply to take part in society. In that sense, democratic principles, the free market, human rights, and the rule of law have a direct bearing on a country's prosperity and the welfare of its people. America and Europe can play a more effective role by acting together from a solid position. Together, we are better placed to guide other countries towards stable socio-economic development. Together, we can also do more to shape the development and growth of global trade along free market lines. That sounds idealistic, but we can do it by staying realistic and taking one step at a time. So I'm not calling for the over-jealous promotion of democracy and high moral standards. What I am saying is that we should encourage, recognize, and also reward steps in the right direction, like the current US government and the European Union are doing in Myanmar, to give you just one example. So we need to step up our economic cooperation, and we need to join forces in our dealings with third countries. That, in a nutshell, is how I think we should move forward now that Europe is no longer America's geopolitical focus of attention. And to be fair, to be absolutely fair, our new position does take a bit of getting used to. But I also see it as proof that, in American eyes, the European Union has attained a certain maturity, despite our problems with the euro. And with maturity comes responsibility. There's no reason why Europe should shy away from that. Now, Europe is fixing what needs to be fixed in its monetary system and is looking beyond this crisis for new opportunities for growth and jobs. And as you may have noticed, that is a work in progress. Of course, the shift in emphasis in US foreign policy also has a direct influence on developments within NATO, which we'll be talking about, obviously, this week during the NATO summit. And let me be frank. It's understandable that the division of costs is being called into question. The outspoken farewell speech delivered by former Defense Secretary Gates in Brussels did not pass unnoticed in Europe. As you know, 3/4 of the NATO bill is paid by the United States and 1/4 by Europe. At the same time, because of the crisis, defense budgets everywhere are being tightened, also in the US. And we are facing new kinds of threats, like cyberterrorism, which conventional military means aren't equipped to deal with. So we are being squeezed on two fronts, financial and strategic. Against this backdrop, I am pleased that NATO and this NATO summit are aiming towards innovation and smart solutions on both fronts. The Netherlands, for example, is a strong advocate of smart defense. And we aim to be one of the lead nations in this field. By working together even closer, by sharing information better and sooner, we can increase the return on our NATO investment in terms of people and resources. In short, we can get greater value for the same money. The Netherlands has positive experiences with smart defense that perhaps can be put to use into developing this concept. For instance, since the mid-90s, there has been a Dutch-German Army Corps, and for some time now, the Dutch Navy has been working closely together with its Belgian counterpart. As regards the specific role we play in NATO, the Netherlands has a reputation for being a reliable and active partner. And we intend to keep it that way, within NATO, but also elsewhere. For instance, we were recently delighted to say yes when asked to host the next Nuclear Security Summit, an initiative of President Obama, which has our firm backing. At the same time, it's true that the defense budget has been cut back in my country for a number of years now. But that has not stopped us, for instance, playing an important role in Afghanistan. Up to the end of 2010, we had a strong military presence of 2,000 servicemen and servicewomen in Uruzgan. And now we are helping the Afghans by conducting a police training mission in Kunduz. And looking beyond 2014, it is clear that the need for international involvement will remain. As before, the Netherlands stands ready to make a contribution. A contribution that takes full account of the responsibility and independence of the Afghans themselves, and one in which the Dutch trademark will again be recognizable, because the Netherlands always opts for an integrated approach, in which all elements are interconnected: security and justice, development and enterprise, freedom and responsibility. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in about 15 minutes we have gone from the ice cream business, via history and the economy, to international peace and security. That sounds like a complicated journey. But in the end, my message centers on two ideas: dialogue and cooperation. That is what made the transatlantic relationship strong in the past. And that is what can help us move forward in the future. We do have similar interests and a similar cultural background. But I'm not saying that Margaret Thatcher was talking nonsense. She was right that Europe and America will never be perfectly alike. But they are perfectly complementary, which is even better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Now we'd like to go out to the audience for questions. Just a reminder that this is not a time for comments. This is only a time for questions in the interest of time. And if you could just raise your arm and wait for a mic from my colleagues, we can get started. Sorry, right over there? No, well, yes, right there in the middle, please. Thank you. Just wait for the mic, please. It's coming from the side.
I guess I have a big question about the economy. Where do you see in Europe, each day we maybe hear Greece is in trouble, then we hear of Spain, and then we come up with all these acronyms, this one might go or that one. What do you see, how is Europe cooperating, and what do you see changing it for the positive?
Yeah. Well, Europe is facing some big issues at the moment, considering the euro. What is happening basically is that after the financial crisis in 2008, we are now facing a sovereign wealth crisis, where we have huge government debts in a number of countries like Italy and also Greece, and some big issues of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment in countries like Spain. So what we are doing now is basically asking, trying to make these countries to bring about savings packages, austerity packages, to bring their public finances in order, whilst at the same time modernizing their economies. Take Italy, for example. Mario Monti, the new prime minister, what he is doing is at the same time trying to bring back the government spending and the deficit, whilst at the same time modernizing the Italian economy, for example, by opening up the professions which are still regulated up to this moment. So it is austerity and reform, modernization at the same time. And that's what needs to happen. And where are we now? The banks have been recapitalized. Portugal and Ireland were facing the abyss, and now at least they have moved away from the abyss. They are still not totally secure, but they're in much better shape than 2 years ago. Spain and Italy have new governments which are taking responsibility. And Greece is still in big trouble. And it's now of paramount importance that the next Greek elections on the 17th of June will bring a government which is willing to accept what the previous government has negotiated with the European colleagues. And to finish off on this question, there are differences of opinion. You might say that countries like Germany and the Netherlands and Finland, we think it is important to have your public finances in order as a base to start growth in your economy, whilst other countries are saying, no, we should relax a little bit more. We have all seen the election campaign of now President Hollande, who was saying we should take some more time to bring our public finances in order and use that time to get some more economic growth. And there's the difference between the US and Europe. You have the dollar, and the dollar is the world currency. I told this to President Obama in November when we had this discussion. I said, I'm jealous because you have the dollar, and the dollar is the world standard. We have the euro, which is a big currency, probably the second biggest in the world, but it's not the world standard. So that means that we cannot take the risk of having inflation and by just printing money or by relaxing the monetary policies too much. So we have to find this balance between austerity and growth.
Thank you. Yes.
I will try to be briefer, a little bit more brief in the next question.
Right here in the fourth row, please, with the glasses. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that question, it would seem to me that keeping the euro as a medium of exchange, like the dollar is, and not trying to get into the work out of all the different government financial problems would make saving the euro so much easier. The same way that if California has problems, it doesn't affect the dollar. They may not pay their bills, but it's not a problem. Wouldn't Europe be much better off breaking the euro and the sovereign wealth crisis totally separate and just keep it as a medium of exchange and let the governments have their own issues?
How would you do this? Can I ask you? Because this would be a fantastic solution. But no, in all seriousness, I believe that the standing of the currency has everything to do with the question how you deal with government debt.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Actually, sir, if you could sit down now, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
No, please. Just one short reaction.
Basically, if you have the euro as a currency, the central bank creates whatever, they do not have to back up the Greek debt or anyone else's debt. If Greek goes under, they can still use the euro. They won't pay their debt, but the euro stays strong. There's no connection.
Okay, thanks. I think
we have to take this discussion a bit further offline.
No, okay.
There seems to be a possibility I've not thought of.
Great. Right there, please, in front of this gentleman.
Thank you for coming. My question is pretty simple. How optimistic are you that Europe is going to be able to get itself together? Because it feels like half of Europe is going one way and the other half is going the other. And I'm just kind of curious, as someone who's been in there, how optimistic are you?
Well, just to give you an example of where we are today, the Dutch government can now take out a loan for 10 years at an interest rate of 1.79%, which is lower than during the French Revolution. So this is the cheapest rate we are paying on our government loans since in 200 years. At the same time, Spain and Italy are for 10-year bonds on 6.1, 6.2%. So you see the huge difference. So in that sense, we are not in good shape. But I'm optimistic. Europe has huge potential in our innovation, our higher education, in our companies, in the innovative possibilities of our people. So I do think we will get over this. And the big question now is what will happen in Greece in the short time. So what will happen in June? But I'm quite optimistic. I'm positive, and I think that the euro will stay intact. Whether Greece will stay part of it, I hope so. We will see what comes out of the next elections. They will have to fulfill their promises. But I think the euro will stay there as a currency, and Europe will overcome this crisis. Absolutely.
Thank you.
No doubt.
Right there, Ellen Rich, please, in the middle. The mic's that way on.
We're experiencing a great deal of political transformation that's taking place in Europe right now. And all politics begin at home. And we're aware of the fact that you will be facing elections in September.
Yes.
Could you tell us what are the major issues that will be debated in the Netherlands going into that election?
Yeah. The election will take place in September. And the reason this election takes place is because the fact that the government was working together with one party in parliament, that form of coalition broke down in April because we could not agree on the savings package, on the austerity package. And this happened on Saturday, and then on Wednesday, a political miracle took place because three smaller parties wanted to support the government, the minority government, in bringing into place an austerity package which would also calm the financial markets. And it has done so spectacularly. So we kept our AAA rating, and we are still in very good shape. But this was a very, well, peculiar 5 days we had at the end of April. I think the next election will be fought on the economy. Which party will be able to bring the Netherlands out of the present financial and economic crisis and make it a stronger country? One of the side issues, no doubt, will be Europe and the fact whether we need to stay in Europe. One big party wants us to leave the European Union. I think that will be a killing for the Dutch economy. We are an exporting nation. We export relatively more than China or even Germany. So our exports are our lifeline. So we don't have 16 million Dutch people. I always tell my voters we have 500 million Dutch people, the whole of Europe. So we need to have this European Union because of our economic wealth and health. And it would be totally crazy to leave the European Union. So it will be on austerity, yes or no. Putting in place the necessary reforms in the housing markets, in the labor market, in healthcare, yes or no, and our position within the European Union. And the central question will be, how do we get this great country in a better shape out of this economic crisis?
Great. Next question. Yeah, right there, please, in the middle with the glasses.
Thank you. Many conferences of this magnitude eventually become known for their accomplishments, the Oslo Accords, the agreements in Annapolis, and so forth. I was wondering whether you anticipate that there will be Chicago Accords or accomplishments here that will be known to posterity, and what you are hoping yourself to have come out of this conference.
Well, as you know, an advisor to Richard Nixon said, history will judge you fairly, and then Nixon was saying it all depends on who will write the history. So this is the same with summit meetings. It will be all into the history writing what happens. It's very difficult to say being in the middle of it. I guess this NATO conference will have two main focal points. One is to keep on modernizing our defenses into this smart defense initiative. And the Netherlands is involved, as I mentioned, the Corps we have together with the Army Corps, we have together with the Germans. We are doing the same now in the marine sector with Belgium, and we are working together now with Norway and Denmark on the Joint Strike Fighter. So these are clear examples of smart defense, and we are willing to participate very actively in some of the more top-down initiatives NATO will put in place, like how do we deal with the rocket shield in Europe, how do we deal with some of the planning issues we will have in NATO. So this is not everything I just mentioned is very sexy or very big, but it is very important. And I think one of the outcomes of this conference will be a clear commitment of NATO partners to move forward with more energy and determination on this road of smart defense. And the second one will be Afghanistan, the post-2014 situation in Afghanistan. And how do we stay involved? How do we make this transition now of Afghanistan, giving it back to the Afghans, whilst at the same time staying involved, training, helping, being there when it is necessary, and to what extent, and are you willing to pledge some money? We have now pledged 30 million euros, so about $40 million each year, starting in 2015, to keep the Afghan security forces well stocked and well trained and well paid. And I hope other countries will keep on making these pledges also, so to keep there what we have built together. There has been so much accomplishments now in Afghanistan, and it should be one of the aims of this conference to make sure that we will keep this in place after 14.
So you may have read in his bio that Prime Minister Rutte teaches students every Thursday. Is that right? In The
Yes,
Hague?
I'm still teaching in a school in The Hague.
Yeah, great.
I think it will be called a high school in the American system.
So are there any students in the audience that would like to raise a question? Yeah, terrific. Right back there, please. The gentleman with the blue and white striped shirt. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will immediately give you an assignment. That's the risk now.
You mentioned cyber terrorism earlier. How real of a threat, do you see that as becoming just as real of a threat as regular terrorism?
Well, it's on the rise. And therefore, it's extremely important that we are aware of it and that we deal with it. And somehow we still see international conflicts in terms of conventional wars, or maybe even nuclear or chemical. Cyber terrorism is now on the rise, and it can impact on our main logistical systems in our countries. It can have a huge impact. Take the Netherlands with half of our countries below the sea level. So it's extremely important to make sure that our country, that Europe, that NATO protects itself against cyber terrorism. And it is difficult to say whether it will be as big as the other threats we are facing. But it certainly is a very serious threat which we need to deal with.
And there was another student question in the same row, the young woman. If we could have a question from her too, please.
Going back to the economy, do you think a proposed financial transaction tax would help solve the euro crisis a little bit? Not really.
I'm officially not in favor or against it. I lead a minority government, so sometimes I have to be
but I mean,
a bit secure in answer, a bit precise in the answer I give. So officially my government is not in favor and not against it. But we are studying the option. But you can see from my body language, I'm not a huge fan.
Thank you. Yeah, right up here, please. Murdu in the fourth row, please.
I don't envy people in Europe who are leading right now, because you have to give bitter medicine. And in democracies, it looks like we're going to get extremists getting elected because you're giving bitter medicine. And I'm just wondering if austerity is working, and whether austerity will end up with having so many extreme governments in Europe or in the United States, that because it's unpopular. Nobody likes to tighten their belt, We want to have ice cream.
And can I say that Good Humor and Breyers are excellent brands. Haagen-Dazs, well, that's for my competition. I don't know that brand. Now, okay. Yes, there is a tendency in. Let me stick to Europe and not to the US. Let me stick on safe grounds. So there is a tendency in Europe for voters to move to the fringe parties on the left and on the right. I always tell my party this is not a mistake of the voters. This is a mistake of the parties in the middle. I am leading a party right of center, and we have a big party in the center and a big party, the Labour Party, which is left of center. So when these two fringes, extremes is a bit too harsh a word, the two fringes are getting bigger and bigger, that has to do with the way the traditional parties are dealing with the issues, how they're explaining what they are doing. And for example, austerity, putting in place savings packages. In the Netherlands, it's quite popular. The Dutch don't like government deficits. They get restless because of that. And companies don't want to invest anymore if that happens. So there is a sort of consensus that government debt needs to be gotten rid of, and that we have to make sure that our economy can grow. But still, also in the Netherlands, we have a bigger party than we had 10 years ago on the left, the Socialist Party, which is left of the Labour Party, and we do have the Freedom Party of Geert Wilders on the right. And both of these are new elements in Dutch politics. But I always tell my voters, well, I come from a big company, so the consumer is always right, and the voter is always right. So if these parties get there, then we are doing something wrong, and we should get our story together and lead from the middle, and that's what we are doing.
Great. Yeah, the woman right here in the purple dress, please. The mic's on the left.
You mentioned Turkey and Afghanistan, and I believe Pakistan was invited to be here. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Israel was. And I wondered if you could comment on whether NATO was in agreement. Were all the members in agreement about that?
I am not sure. I know that Pakistan is now coming in, because when I came in a couple of hours ago through the airport, there was the Pakistan ambassador awaiting the arrival of the Pakistan president. So he certainly, at least he is in town, and I guess he will visit. He will visit the conference. I'm not sure what exactly is the reason why Israel is not invited. I don't know. Of course, there is this issue, this fight between Turkey and Israel on the flotilla, the Gaza flotilla, a couple of years ago. So it might have to do with that, but I have to check that out, what is the reason behind it.
Okay, in the very back there, please, the woman in the black dress in the second to last row. Okay, it's not black, sorry. It looks black from here, sorry.
It's okay, there won't be a quiz on this later. I was hoping you could elaborate on what you meant by the types of smart security measures you hope the Netherlands will bring to NATO.
Yes, well, we are participating in a couple of these. Of course, we are working on this shield in Europe to protect us from enemy rockets. So, and the Netherlands is involved in that through our 4 main vessels and through our Patriot system. Secondly, we have some very good examples which I mentioned with Belgium, with Germany, with Norway and Denmark, which is still, well, in early stage, but where we are working together on with Norway and Denmark on replacement of our F-16 fighter jets. We have a long relationship now with our Marines with the UK. So there you see that we are working very well together with other countries. Another area where we are particularly focusing on is on bermbommen, hoe zeg je dat in het Engels? Explosive devices, which is one of the big curses in Afghanistan. And we as the Netherlands, we lost soldiers, and I think all countries being present in Afghanistan have experienced this awful fact. And we now have we are involved in technology, unmanned, by mechanical means to dismantle these bombs. So it is in that very concrete areas where we are participating and where we try to bring our experience to the table. There are now 21 of these more top-down initiatives within NATO, and the Netherlands is now involved in 17 of them.
Great. Yeah, right here, please, on the third row. Just 1 second. Please wait for the mic. It's right beside you.
I wanted to bring the subject of Russia because the alliance, of course, first was, that was the historic meaning of it with the Cold War. How much is there still Cold War with Russia, and is Russia looked at in a different way? It could become a very important partner, possibly.
Yeah, it's difficult with Russia. I had a visit to Russia and had a chance to speak with both then Prime Minister Putin and President Medvedev. As you know, they sometimes swap jobs. But then Prime Minister Putin and President Medvedev in October. I guess there are many sides to this. One is that Russia feels threatened by the West and feels a bit isolated. And one of the areas where this is visible is with Syria. We have excellent relationship. Uri Rosenthal, Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands, he's sitting here on the front row, has a personally excellent relationship with the Russian foreign minister. Lavrov, and so we are trying to use this niche, this personal relationship we have with him, and the fact that the Netherlands is the biggest or one of the biggest investors now in Russia, to have as much influence as possible, and to be clear to them that there is absolutely no reason why Russia should feel threatened by the West. And when we are building this shield, it is not meant against Russia, it is meant against Iran and other possible threats from, not from Russia, but from other countries in the region. And that dialogue is going on. At the same time, I was in this job for a couple of weeks in November 2010, when the last NATO summit took place in Portugal, in Lisbon. And I was really impressed when Medvedev entered the room. So there was this NATO summit, and the president of Russia was entering the room, and one of my close colleagues, advisors, is here today. He was also in that room, and that made a huge impression on me. I was born and raised in the Cold War, and NATO was meant to fight, well, not to fight, at least to defend us from the Russians, and if necessary, to fight the Russians. And here was the Russian president entering a NATO summit, President Obama, President Medvedev sitting at the same table. So we have come a long way, but still, it's not a total stable relationship, as we all know.
Yeah, right here in the second row, please. Right here.
One of the countries that hasn't been mentioned directly is Iran. Next week, they're going to start negotiation again in Baghdad. Can you talk about the Netherlands position, about the whole situation, and what you expect the outcomes to be?
Yeah. We are working very closely with the US on the issue of Iran. And we are particularly worried about the security situation in the region, and of course Israel and the region as a whole. At the same time, Iran keeps telling us that their nuclear program is for domestic use and not meant to build offensive weapons. So I think we need measures of trust, we need total openness, we need to be able to have inspections of the program, etc., etc. And as long as that does not take place, there's every reason why we should be very worried about what is happening in Iran. And it is extremely important that the US and Europe stand shoulder to shoulder, trying to convince the Iranians to back away from potential military use of their nuclear program. They are saying it is not meant for that. And we cannot just trust them on the fact that they're saying this. We need to have measures, confidence-building measures. We need to have openness, visitations, etc. of their programs.
Yeah, right there, please.
You underlined that your country, the Netherlands, is a founding member of both the NATO and the European Union. And I'm sure you know there's this well-known joke that the European Union and NATO are those two organizations, two institutions which share the same city, but they seem to be acting as if they were on different planets. So I'm wondering whether you actually agree with this, whether you think it's funny today, in today's times, and if, knowing that there are 21 members out of 28 members of NATO, which are also members of the European Union, and if there's anything actually being done to improve the situation and to make sure that this joke is just not funny.
And I have not even been successful to have one ambassador in Brussels instead of two from the Netherlands. We still have an ambassador to NATO, an ambassador, of course, to the Kingdom of Belgium, and an ambassador to the European Union. And Frank Major, who is our ambassador to NATO, no, I'm not trying to skip your job right now. But in the spirit of this question, I agree with you. At the same time, with the fact that we now have the High Commissioner on Foreign Affairs, Baroness Lady Ashton. She is also now present tomorrow in the NATO Council, together with all the presidents of the European Union. So that's a good thing. So we are working on that, and particularly with Libya, we have tried to bring as much as possible the military side through NATO, and what then needed to happen in terms of trade relations and nation building, where the EU could help to bring that in alignment. But even to get NATO on one page has been difficult in Libya. took a couple of weeks in March last year. At the end, we succeeded. You remember that the Turks were not invited to the first Sarkozy conference in Paris in March last year. So that didn't help. And then, well, later on at least, we were able to bring Turkey on board. And then later on to get, as a European Union, a more common position on Libya. But you're right, this is not, we should improve it. This should be improved. Yeah.
We have time for one last very brief question. Yeah, right in the back there, please. The woman in the fourth row from the back, yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned China, so I have a question about that. Besides trade, the Netherlands has also established lawsuit help center in China. So how would you vision Holland's role in change China and its democracy? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity. I was planning to visit China in June, July this year, but because we now have elections in September, I have to postpone this. And I hope to be able myself to go there in this present capacity after the elections. But I had a chance to have some very high-level visits to The Hague from senior leadership from China and a senior ranking member of the Politburo coming into The Hague last week. And what we try to do in our dealings with China, with Russia, is always to tell them, yes, it's great to have economic growth and to bolster that even further and our economic ties. At the same time, it's our Dutch, our Western, European, American belief that to have a really sustainable, economic prosperity, it needs to be anchored in the rule of law, human rights, the free press, and democracy. And China is making progress, but there's still a lot which needs to be done to bring it to the level we would like them to be.
Thank you. I think when you realize that the Prime Minister had an 8 to 9 hour flight today. He's about 7 hours ahead from the time he got up this morning, and this was his second language. I think you can share my appreciation and awe at the wonderful job you did sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you. Thank you. We would ask that you all remain seated until the Prime Minister has left the room. Thank you all very much for being with us today.